Namaste. Welcome to the Satsang today. Today's subject is overcoming ego. And of course, this is really the central issue. We have become identified with this ego body personality, and we want to remember our essential nature as the divine love and joy and peace. We want to be unlimited rather than limited. And society in general seeks to maybe improve oneself. They say, well, I want to improve myself. And when they say that, what they're saying is they want their personality to work a little bit better. They want to, maybe get along better with others or overcome some habit that's causing problems. And of course, this is really one of the great training grounds, our interactions with life and each other. But we have to remember that in the practice of yoga, we root our understanding of what we're trying to accomplish to universal truths. We're not looking for the latest psychological trick to deal with any given thing. Not that we're against little tricks that help us to improve ourselves, but we understand that there's a difference between a Band-Aid and healing from the inside out. We're trying to heal from the inside out. And the most transformative thing that we do is meditation and the practice of Kriya Yoga for systemic change, for change that comes from the inner workings of the process. But at the same time, we have to work with the practical realities of the way that our personalities, the way that our egos, the specific qualities that are being manifested through our personalities. Some people are easygoing, some people are not. Some people, every mixture of these things. And through meditation, we begin to see more and more clearly what's really going on. And through the practice of the yamas and the niyamas, we have to be aware of how the energy is flowing through our consciousness, and are we being aggressive? Are we being truly nonviolent towards others? Are we being forgiving? Do we desire credit for things that we do? All kinds of ways in which we bind ourselves to the smaller self. This is what we're going to talk about today, and we're going to cover some very specific points that Kriyanandaji made in his book, Sadhu Beware. But first, we're going to hear from Swami Kriyananda himself.
You give us a definition or a way to overcome ego consciousness?
Well, in the short run, while we're living in this body, don't keep emphasizing your ego. Somebody was with me at a meeting of two other people who were well known, and they were having a big sort of one-upmanship contest, each person saying how much he'd done, and I haven't done anything, and I didn't say anything. I've probably done a great deal more than they, but it's been done through me. I haven't done it. I've written 100 books. I've written over 400 pieces of music. I've created 9 communities. I've lectured all over the world in many languages. I don't feel I've done anything. So to overcome ego, we have to, first of all, tell ourselves God is the doer, not I. Don't take to yourself the applause that other people give you. When people say that I've done a good job in a lecture, I feel God is the doer. And so don't worry if people insult you, for example. It's a very good thing to be insulted. It helps you to clarify your own consciousness. Are they insulting me, my true self, or not? Thank them for insulting you. Your ego is something you want to get rid of because it's the source of all your trouble. So anything that will get rid of that sense of pride, of egotism, will be good for you. So never take to yourself the credit for anything you do. Say God is the doer. It doesn't mean, well, you sit back and let him do it. I had this experience many years ago because Yogananda told us as ministers that we should let God talk through us. So in the middle of a talk, there were 100 people there. In the middle of a sermon, I said, well, all right, I'll stop and let God talk through me. So I stopped. And I was silent for 2 minutes. Now, 2 minutes in the middle of a sermon, 2 minutes of silence is a long time. And some people were perspiring, thinking I'd lost it. And I was just perfectly comfortable waiting for God to speak. And finally I understood what Yogananda had meant. He said, I will reason, I will, I will act, but guide thou my reason, will, and activity to the right path in every action. And so I had to talk, but I had to ask him to inspire what I said, him to give me the vibrations to talk, so that when I speak now, I try to feel that I'm also sharing his vibrations with people. And I'm consciously sending out those vibrations instead of just sending out mental ideas through the form of words. So the more you get away from the thought that I personally am doing it, and to belittle this I, as long as it doesn't make you develop an inferiority complex, if you can do it with a sense of freedom, the more you find that the ego takes a back seat and the soul begins to come through. So we need to have that affirmation in our daily egoic life too.
So it's interesting that spiritual growth is a conscious act of will. And Swamiji was saying that is there a reason why Mr. Sharma can't sit in here? Kriyanandaji was making the point that we have to act, which is an act of personality expression as far as we can tell and the way we're experiencing it. But we have to attune our actions, our thoughts to this inner flow, this inner inspiration. And this is a tug of war, because in the beginning we're not aware of any inspiration. But as we calm the mind, and as we actively seek to harmonize our awareness with spirit, we will begin to actually experience, well, it can happen in a variety of ways, but either spontaneous right action or new thoughts coming to you about how to act. And the key here is something Swamiji didn't talk about in that when he was mentioning how the ministers are taught to speak. But as a part of that training is the process of listening. It's being with people, not being at people. So we don't talk to people, we're talking with people. But when we talk, we have to simultaneously listen. We have to perceive what is the truth underneath this moment. And what you'll find is that as you tune yourself to the truth underneath that moment, you will perceive things about it that you had not perceived previously. And connected to today's focus is, what are the qualities of energy that I am expressing in my actions? Are the energies that I'm expressing building my sense of separateness and ego, personality, and I'm affirming that I'm good and I'm better than them, and competitive consciousness and me against them and how dare they? Or am I feeling unity? and acceptance? Am I feeling that, look, in the end it doesn't matter what happens as long as I keep my peace? As long as I feel God's presence, the world can explode. It really doesn't matter. You're not going to die in the sense that you'll become nothing. You'll just be freed from the problems that you had in that incarnation, and if you haven't graduated, you'll come back and have some more problems. So whatever you can think of as the worst thing that can happen, let it, imagine that it's happened and forget about it. And now, I've talked with many of you, some of the classic things that happen at work. Somebody wants to take credit for your ideas or won't let you even express your ideas, or all of the various ways in which people, when they're communicating, express their egos. And in most cases, 99.9%, including all of us, is our misperception about what's going on. We have to grow that perception. We have to develop our ability to understand the truth of what's taking place out there and what's taking place in here. So we have to listen while we act. And that's a process of attunement. And the more we practice attunement while we act, then gradually over time we'll get better and better at feeling both inspiration and spontaneous positive expression. So in Sadhu Beware, Swamiji gave some very specific practices that we can use in order to experiment with this ego's tendency for self-justification, separation, and thus binding itself to the body personality. So here's an example. When someone else gets the credit for something that you've done, don't look for a way of letting people know where the credit really belongs. See, this is a natural thing. Well, no, wait a minute. I deserve credit. This is, and a lot of assertive training is assert yourself. And there is a time and a place to assert yourself. But you have to be aware of why you're doing it, and is this the right moment to do that? And as a general practice for any period of time, practice doing these things to, one, recognize what's going on, and two, see how it feels. See how it feels to let it go. Just let it go. Let's see. When someone has a good idea that you have already had, it will help you to practice humility and tell yourself it's the idea that counts, not the person who had the idea. So then you can say, oh, that's a good idea. Let them take the credit for the idea. It's the idea that counts. So we let it go. Remember, God is doing all this stuff. Every time that we take credit for, I did this, we are mistaken. God did this through this form. We can't do anything. The ego has no power of itself except as that it's animated by the soul which is of God. So if we keep straight in terms of what's really taking place, then we'll free ourselves from these causes of unhappiness that we have when things don't go the way that we want them to go. If someone scolds you for something you didn't do, you may see some good reason for letting him know that you're not guilty. If it doesn't really matter who did it, however, you will gain more spiritually if you say nothing. Get blamed for it. I don't think that necessarily you need to go to jail if somebody else stole something. That might be a situation where you should speak up. But a lot of times these things come up, and we have to let it go. Let it go. I remember, and this has been part of our training, is basically you want to think, do I really need to justify myself in this situation? Or should I just let it go? Most of the time you want to let it go, but I remember many years ago, Kriyanandaji thought that I had done certain things that I hadn't done. And it put me in a very awkward position because I didn't want to say you're wrong. And I didn't want to justify myself. But I had to say something because he asked me. He said, this is what I understand, and then I had to share my point of view with him. And the key here was that he asked me. He asked me to share my point of view. And then in my mind, this was an exercise for me to actively pursue this in a way that was the best way, which was not to say, I'm being falsely accused and how dare they and all this, is to calmly and simply communicate the truth of the situation as you see it. And not to have the vibration of trying to convince, only to present. So you can see the difference I'm talking about. You don't have to convince anybody. If you're called to present your point of view, present it. They can believe it or not. There's a point at which, and there's some situations where you may push a little bit, you may try to get someone to see your point of view, but there's a point at which you have to back up and say, they aren't going to get it, or, I have exerted my will to the point where I feel that this is enough. This is as far as I should take it, and then I should back up. And this is a learning process. It's something that we have to practice consciously and see how these things, what they feel like when we're going through it, and then begin to stop ourselves before we act only automatically, and then we can begin to consciously experiment. If you see others eager to air their views, be generous to them. Let them speak. Add thoughts of your own only if you see that the others might be interested in what you have to say. That oftentimes people feel compelled to speak. I have to admit, I did this a lot when I first came to Ananda. And I saw it as eagerness to participate. In other words, I wanted to be part of the group. But I didn't realize that way of expressing was actually disharmony to the group, because I was expressing restlessness. I was expressing a need to speak, rather than bringing up a point that would be beneficial to share. And we have to say, when you look at the world around us, there's endless problems that need to be improved. You aren't going to fix them all. Get over it. Now, what has God given you to put your energy into? That's the question. Is this a circumstance in which God has given me to participate? Well, you're there, so it may be that you're supposed to say something, but you're there. It may be that it's a test to see if you cannot say anything. You don't know. You've got to open yourself up to the truth of that moment. Says, what has God given me to do in this moment? We generalize sometimes, there's exceptions, but when somebody doesn't often speak, then when they speak, it's likely that you'll listen to them. Where the person who speaks all the time is likely not to be listened to as often. There are exceptions to that. Swami certainly was one. But he could hold his tongue, I'll tell you. He would not say anything for years. And then only in many cases, if asked, he would just let it go. Had no personal need to let you know that he knew. And this is ego. This is central, this knee-jerk response that we have in so many situations. We feel that we need to do it, when in fact only our egos need to do it. Our souls don't. And the situation doesn't necessarily call for it, the need for it to be done. Don't try constantly to explain or define for others' gratification who and what you are. Let your actions and inner reality speak for you. That means it really doesn't matter other people's opinions of you. I mean, let the people think that you're a fool or incompetent. You do your job. It speaks for itself. And if others can't see it, then that's their problem, not yours. You say, well, if it happens at work, maybe you'll get fired because they don't see it. Document what you do if you're concerned about that. And if there is some sort of review, you can show the things that you've done. But there's a point at which you have to realize that God is the doer behind all these things. If God puts you in some kind of crazy position where you're going to get fired for for something that you didn't do or something that's untrue, maybe that's a sign. Maybe that's a sign that you're not working where you should be working. Maybe you should stand up. Again, you have to see the truth of that particular situation. You should be able to stand up, but you should not feel that you have to push against others unless you feel the guidance to do so. And there's an art to it. There's a sense of attunement that is essential for recognizing when we've acted in that sort of pushing or pulling energy in the right time and place. So when Swamiji asked me to explain myself, that was the right time and place to do it. And the result of that was very beneficial. But I didn't go knocking at his door to say, "Oh, you've got to hear me." In many ways, I had to wait until he was open to resolving the subject that was at hand. It's something that we have to be aware of and that we have to begin to practice consciously. And being aware of our energy and not acting compulsively. I can't help myself. This is the way that I always react to these situations. We've got to learn to control that energy, be aware of it, and even you'll begin to say, "Oh, I can see they're about to push my button," and then you can withdraw into yourself. And it's what's really entertaining is when you practice seeing that God is putting you in these situations and synchronizing them for the benefit of everybody involved. And you can only imagine that somehow, maybe through others, God is watching and going, "Oh, let's see what happens." And good, or "Oh no, okay, well, 3 more incarnations, that's okay." No. So laugh with others, but never at them. Laughter is a very interesting component of the way that we respond to life. A lot of humor, modern humor today, is very negative. And they really like to cut people up. I hate to admit that I've even seen any of this. But they have this thing in America called a roast. And a celebrity roast, and what happens is they have a big gathering, and then there's a celebrity who's they're the VIP of the evening, but then what they do to the VIP is tell these terrible jokes on them. I mean, really nasty. I mean, and the thing is that in modern culture, in modern American culture, in that, I should say, particular swarm of that culture, they're just ruthless. And they will, foul language and the most cutting, stabbing, ego squishing, and the worse it is, the harder they all laugh. and if it's not really bad, then things didn't go well. Versus, Swamiji really loved P.G. Wodehouse. And most of you know that this is an Ananda tradition. Many holidays we'd all sit down and he would read one of the stories of Jeeves or Bertie Wooster and these incredible characters. And the thing about P.G. Wodehouse is that anything can be laughed at when you laugh with it instead of at it. And there's this really delicate, subtle, the humor of life. Life is funny. Really, as Master said, everybody's crazy. They just have different kinds of craziness. And life itself is crazy. It's nuts. But when you come at it from a very sattvic point of view, when you come at it with an open heart and a sense of oneness, a sense of this is, my loving friend, then you can laugh at the quirks. You laugh at the guy who has a funny shaped head, or a different an accent that you have trouble understanding, or any other, some unique quality. Everybody has them. And when you begin to recognize that each and every person in the creation is my own self, and you begin to do nonviolence to your own self, both within you and forgive yourself for making mistakes, and laugh at yourself. Be willing to laugh at yourself, and be willing to be the focus of the jokes, as long as you're not causing people to be more aware of you. But be willing to let people laugh at you. There's another example that Swamiji says, let people laugh at you, enjoy it. Let people ignore you, enjoy it. This is great stuff for the dissolution of the ego. And so when we laugh with your heart, and laugh in oneness. Don't laugh at, but laugh with. And see the humor in life, but recognize that underneath all of life is a purity, is a holiness that we want to respect, that we want to rever this incredible reality. We don't recognize often enough in life an experience of holiness, of purity. And when you experience God on deeper and deeper levels, we experience true holiness, something that is untouched by ego tarnishment, selfishness, hurtfulness. And it's not just a lacking of those negative qualities, but it's a brilliance. It's a brilliance of purity. And this is something that we can't really perceive with the personality. We have to perceive it with the soul. That we have to inwardly perceive this holiness, this sanctity, this incredible power of purity. And when we release ourselves from ego consciousness, we can perceive that on ever deeper levels. We don't often talk about that. We talk about the 8 attributes, but you could even say that all of those attributes, when expressed in a divine way, express holiness, purity. Cleanliness is the ultimate level of cleanliness. Is sanctity, is holiness, and this is when we start using words, that which is sacred. This is something that the worldly mind doesn't easily embrace, sacredness. But when you embrace life with your soul, and when we free ourselves from ego attachments, then we will perceive the sanctity of all life. And we will free ourselves from the sufferings that we cause ourselves through being bound to ego consciousness.